I'm Pastor Wayne Morrow, the transitional pastor at Peoples Presbyterian Church, and I'm very excited to be joined here today by Braden Storkenson, and we've had the privilege of him preaching at All Peoples, and we really loved his message. So, Braden, just introduce yourself to us, if you would, a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Braden Storkenson. I live over in Temecula, California. That's the city with Pechanga Casino. I've grown up there basically since I was 4 years old. My parents moved there pretty early on, 1998. You can do the math there in terms of how old I am. But grew up in the area. I pretty much sensed a calling toward ministry when I was 16 years old. And within kind of that same time frame, I was immediately thrown into this whirlwind of theology. Within the same month, my oldest brother, who was a missionary for quite some time, he told our family that he was now atheist, and within that same month, our close family friend came out of the closet and told us that he's gay. And so here I was, deciding I wanted to go into ministry and having this whirlwind, and I had this worldview that said, hey, if you're gay, you're living in sin. If you're not a Christian, you're going to hell. And that didn't seem right with me, to look at our close family friend and who was one of the most loving people I know, and to say, oh, he's living in sin. And my oldest brother, who is also one of the most loving people I know, and dare I say even most Christ-like people I know, and to say, oh, he's going to hell. It sent me on this journey of really deconstruction and reconstruction, and that really lasted many, many years. I wish I could say I immediately pivoted, but through Bible college and seminary, it was something where I feel like my heart immediately knew where Christ stood on things, but my mind took many years to try to reconcile and figure out the cognitive dissonance and analyze the scriptures and all of that on it. And so it's just been many years throughout that time. I started interning and working at my home church in Temecula. And after many, many years, I eventually didn't necessarily feel like I could work in that environment anymore as I kind of went down this journey of deconstruction and reconstruction. And so just recently, I actually stepped away from those positions, and I'm working as a baker at a coffee shop here in town, and pursuing being ordained through a denomination called the Disciples of Christ. And it's been a wild journey, but it's been a beautiful one for sure.
You said something there. You said a lot there, Braden, that I really appreciate. And I kind of went through a journey of moving out of my childhood young person faith to a more broader perspective, but it took me more like 40 years to get there. And so you've really been going through quite a bit, quite early. We were joking early about what title we call you. You said, well, you're recently, retired or left from being the pastor. Mm-hmm. Maybe a new title would emerge. I don't know. The baker. That sounds pretty good. I like.
Yeah, I'm currently head baker at a coffee shop, so I guess you could call it head baker / volunteer pastor, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that you're finding a different path, and that's that's really part of what I think is exciting about younger people in Christian leadership. They're not following the mold that was laid out for me, which I followed, and I found it not quite right, but I didn't know how to get out of it. So it sounds like you found some courage somewhere to do this, and it sounds like it's related to some personal things that you had to wrestle with.
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, LGBTQ inclusion and affirmation was the biggest thing for me that became the hill I would die on. I worked not just as a youth pastor, but I was at the Christian school that was attached to this larger church. And over time, because of the fact that I was really the only one of the few affirming teachers on staff, many of the LGBTQ kids kind of gravitated toward me, and we created a space for all these kids. But one day admin sent out this email that just kind of said, hey, and it was a general email to all the teachers, but it was pretty obvious who it was directed toward because there were only about 5 or 6 of us who were inclusive and affirming of LGBT people. And they just kind of told us to not refer to students by their preferred names and pronouns, but instead to refer to them by their birth names and their birth sex. And that was something where I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. That was a hill I would die on, and so I continued to refer them by their preferred names and pronouns, and because I felt like that was the most loving thing to do. But that was kind of the main thing where I kind of went, okay, I don't think I belong here, and I need to start transitioning out of here. And so that was really just the beginning of this time last year. And so I finished out the semester last December, and that was that. Turned in my notice shortly before Thanksgiving, finished out the semester, passed it on to someone else, and I still volunteer coach there to stay connected to those students in some way. But it's definitely been it has been a journey. I can't say it's been easy in any way, shape, or form, but it has been well worth it in the grand scheme of things.
Well, it seems to me that one of the things that is so important that Jesus told his followers was that to take up their cross and follow me, to take a different direction in life because you feel I'm calling you to do it. And the idea of taking up a cross was going to be something that was going to be scary, painful, difficult. It sounds like that's all been a part of it. It also sounds like for you, it also sounds like there's other people. You're not alone in this, and that's a term I've been hearing more lately. Is ex-evangelicals? They tend to be younger-ish than me, and you seem to be part of a movement to find a different way to follow Christ. Can you tell us about that broader movement?
Yeah. I think it is. It's one of those things where you feel like the minority, but I think it's a very silent majority because there's so much religious shame, fear, guilt that surrounds different theologies. So to even speak up of saying, hey, we don't agree with this anymore, there's so many power structures in place that are really impossible to address and to navigate. I frankly think there's this reality that we look at history in hindsight. In fact, many Christians stood in support of it. They quoted Bible verses surrounding it. Yet, eventually, in hindsight, we can look at that and go, "No, that was absurd. How could somebody claim to be Christian and hold slaves?" And I think the same is true of things like LGBTQ inclusion and affirmation today, where we're going to look, I think in hindsight, yes, we quote all these verses, but eventually we're going to look back and go, how on earth were Christians against this? So there's this larger movement where people are having this cognitive dissonance and saying this doesn't make sense. No matter how many Bible verses we attach to this, it does not seem right. And it frankly has been a growing minority. I think the just different social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of these different platforms have really created a way for all these different people to interact. Whereas before, there was this sense of, okay, I obviously can't say anything. In fact, if it weren't for different online platforms, I don't think I would be where I'm at today, because of the fact that within my own community, there are very few people, I think, who are voicing these things. And this is the community that I was a part of was a megachurch. It was 3,500 people. And over time, I began to find out there's these different people who feel this way, but don't feel like they can say anything. But because of social media, we kind of found each other, where it was just through just seeing, oh, we're liking some of the same things. We're you kind of pick up on the subtle language of what if someone says this phrase or something. Okay, you know where they stand on this particular. So it's.
Well, I'm very interested in this idea that you found some like-minded souls in what is otherwise a desert of isolation through different platforms. I'm curious how you see maybe future Christian leaders using those platforms to enable others to find Christian fellowship or spiritual maturity. And of course, we're pursuing that right now as we provide this YouTube channel. Have you had any visions of I'd like to do more of this and what it would look like in terms of using different platforms to connect with Christians or connect with people that are searchers or connect with people that are hurt because of the church?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I mean, it might surprise someone to hear someone my age, but I don't necessarily think the digital space and digital community can ever be a full substitute for in-person community and in-person worship services. That there's something about that face-to-face that is beautiful. But I will say it can be a powerful supplement. It's not a substitute, but it's a supplement. And what I mean by that is, I mean, just think of like a nutrition supplement. It fills in the gaps if you can't quite get all the nutrition that you need in a particular space. So if there are times where we can't get all the community that we need. The global pandemic, quarantine, this was where we clearly saw it, where there were times where all these churches had to really innovate and get into the digital space. They were kind of just hurled right into it of, okay, how do we connect to people while they're in quarantine? And so that was a time where, okay, we know it's not necessarily a substitute, but this is something where we can kind of supplement it for right now while we're all in quarantine. And then the same might be true of maybe somebody is feeling and thinking some of the things that we're talking about, where they're questioning, they're deconstructing, they're reconstructing, and there might not be any churches in their area that are affirming, that are inclusive, that they feel like they can talk to and go to someone about these sorts of realities. And in that case, that's where that comes in. That was something that I experienced. There was this church in Redlands that I connected with and began to kind of interact with, as well as a church in San Diego that I began to connect with and interact with, while living in Temecula. And for me, just especially being more of a public figure in my area, if I were to go to another church and start engaging with these different things, it could have been very destructive for me and my family of just how that could have come back. And so the digital space was a powerful thing for us to be able to venture out and to talk and interact with people who frankly didn't really even know about my church. I would say the name of the church, and if you said that in Temecula, it's a 3,500 person church, they would go, "Oh, you're from there." And whereas if I said that in San Diego, they had no idea what I was even talking about. Yeah. So there was this freedom to kind of start over and have a clean slate interacting with people. That was absolutely beautiful. And so all that,
I like that. Yeah, it's kind of like you call it the Nicodemus space, where Nicodemus goes to Jesus at night because he wants to kind of explore what his community doesn't want him to explore.
Yes.
The Pharisees didn't want him to explore. He wanted to explore, but he needed some sort of nighttime cover to go visit with Jesus. And that's what you're saying the internet kind of provided for you as you connected with churches to discover some things about Jesus, to talk to Jesus about some things that you couldn't even talk about in your own church.
I think the Nicodemus thing is a powerful image for pastors who are deconstructing, because they feel like they have to uphold a particular religious dialogue and mindset, yet they are completely uncertain about any of it. And so they feel like they have to go to someone in the middle of the night and to just keep it hidden, whereas this is really how they're thinking and feeling.
Well, I would like people to see you as that person through your connection with all peoples. I would like people to know who you are, to be able to hear what you have to say and to be able to respond in some way. And one way is they can just, by the way, this is an advertisement, but they can contact us through our webpage, and we can help them get connected up with you if they're having similar, concerns and trying to redo their faith. So very good. If you're willing to do that, we'll hopefully pass some people on. Final thing is, I talked about us being older generation, the baby boomers. There's actually a huge vacancy in Christian leadership because there were a lot of boomers that were in leadership, and they're just haven't been coming into the ranks like they used to. There are people finding new ways to do ministry and to lead other than the traditional type church. But there are a lot of us churches out there that have followed a traditional path. We're interested in how do we pass this, what we have, as ragged as it might be after all these years, what can we do to encourage you and other folks like you in Christian leadership and in actually exploring the church?
Well, I think the fact that you're thinking specifically about leadership, you are already powerfully on the right track. Because most congregations, when they think about the next generation, it's just, oh, how can we bring in younger people? But there's no sense of how can we give ownership. There's this large study out of a Fuller Seminary. They have this whole branch called Fuller Youth Institute, led by Dr. Kara Powell and Dr. Steve Argue. Which, if you're familiar with Rob Bell at all, Dr. Steve Argue, he was the youth and young adults pastor at Rob Bell's church for many years. And now he's part of Fuller Seminary, kind of leading this next generation studies. And so you have these multiple PhDs who their whole thing is they just study next generation ministry. And all that to say, they did this super large study, and it's published in a book called Growing Young. Would highly recommend it. And one of the they kind of highlight 6 key things that all of these congregations have in common that are very healthy, that have a strong presence of young people and really multi-generational. And you'll be happy to know that it's not like, oh, you have to have, some cool person with skinny jeans, you got to have a big budget, blah, blah, blah. Like all of these churches were very different. Denominationally, just how the pastors were wired, all of these different things, but they were kind of different themes. And one of the main 6 themes was what they called keychain leadership, of this idea of passing the keys on to the next generation, whatever that might look like, of thinking through, okay, how can we as leaders give different leadership keys to the next generation. And this was something when I was a youth pastor, when I read this, there were several high school students who regularly set up and tore down for us at the youth ministry. It was, and there was, at a certain point, I really trusted this group of kids, and so I literally physically made a copy of the key to the closet there at the church, and I gave it to them so that way, if when they got there before me, they could set up. And it was such a simple thing of just making them a copy of the keys, but you could tell the ownership it gave them, how they just lit up. There's something about giving keys over, and I don't just mean literal keys, but metaphorically thinking, okay, what keys do we have, whether it be teaching, worship, setting up, tearing down, thinking through all the elements of what goes into church and church leadership in our congregations, and going, okay, how can we pass these different keys on to the next generation and really unlock that keychain leadership? Because if you just try to say, hey, come to our service, there's no sense of ownership. There's just, okay, just come sit in the chair and then head out. But that's essentially boring. But when there's the sense of ownership to it, there is so much beauty and purpose that comes from that. And so when we tell the next generation, hey, you're important, you're so meaningful here, like God is like, a lot of that doesn't become real until you've actually give something purposeful to do within the context of church. So yeah, so I think that the fact that you're specifically going to, okay, how can we raise up Christian leaders in the next generation?
Right.
That is the mindset that is what will lead to expansion within the next generation.
Well, that's what we want to do. If you were here in person, I might just give you my key to the new church that we have at All Peoples on Date Palm. We're going to do that right now.
If someone is in my situation, I would highly recommend finding a community where you can connect with and just talk through all of these things. There are many different ones that I can think of that are wonderful, like places like All Peoples. But truly just wherever someone is located, to just look up an affirming, inclusive church to connect with, to start just kind of dialoguing and thinking through a lot of these questions. But the reality is there's tons of wonderful podcasts as well. If someone kind of wishes to go down that rabbit trail. So whether that be there's the Deconstructionist podcast, there's the Liturgist podcast, there is Heretic Happy Hour. there's lots of wonderful podcasts that if you were to just go into a podcast app and search these questions, you will find plenty of people really exploring these in beautiful ways. But the reason I say to reach out to a congregation is because if you can connect with a pastor, they can kind of guide you through these particular things in a way that just a Google search couldn't as much, because there's so many different questions. And there's always the question behind the question of just whatever you would Google versus what's actually in your heart and mind. And so, if, for example, if someone's asking questions about hell, there's inevitably a lot of pastoral questions there as well, in terms of what their family situation is. Is there someone that they dearly love who's not Christian that they're kind of deconstructing with all of that? So there's many layers to which I would say, okay, find a church congregation that is inclusive, that is progressive to some extent, and that is truly open to questions. Many congregations have, hey, we're open to questions, but they have their prescribed answers. And so I would recommend looking up churches and going to a website called Church Clarity. And Church Clarity really helps with weaving through those things. Because like I said, many churches will have all are welcome on their website. But there's not really all are welcome. If you believe that women should be in leadership, they're like, oh, no. Or if you believe that LGBT people should be able to have this should be able to marry who they love, and or if whatever it might be, then there might be these parameters of, no, that's actually not where they're at. But Church Clarity, they actually do a pretty good job of looking at many churches, and it'll actually say, here's where they stand on blank based on what we could find on their website. And it'll say clear, unclear, and then kind of like there's the spectrum in between there. that website has really helped a lot of people, and so I would highly recommend that. All right.
And in terms of getting a hold of you,
they can just email me. We can put my email in the description.
Okay.
blstorkenson@gmail.com, which is hard to spell. So yeah, we'll just put it there. But yeah, I'm behind my fellow millennials. I kind of intentionally am off social media, so there's not really a lot of places they can follow me there.
You're a baker.
Yes, I'm a baker. I just kind of stay in my little silo and do my thing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Oh, and I will tell you, this idea of connecting up with churches is so wonderful. I learned to rock climb when I was out here, and I was I was on YouTube looking at rock climbing guidance, and the first one I went to, he said, if you're trying to learn how to rock climb on YouTube, you've got a real serious problem ahead of you. So he says, I can give you a couple of pointers, but good Lord, you need to find somebody who really knows the terrain and the equipment and can get you involved. So I hope that people will do that, and we certainly are welcome here.
Yeah.
with all of those questions. That's what we're about. And one thing, just by the way, our church has adopted a more light. It's called Presbyterians More Light, and it really is affirming of LGBTQ and other social and justice issues. So that we're trying to make it clear where we stand, at least. So we hope people can get a hold of Braden. Hope they can come by or listen in, and then they can reach us live and record it on YouTube and Facebook Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. and also through our YouTube channel. And we hope that they will do that, and we can have some dialogue and conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.